Hello dear participants and friends, as you all know that we are making a series in the history of English literature, and this is fifth video in the history of English literature. Friends, let me convey a few things before starting this tutorial. I was unable to upload videos on history of English literature because I was engaged in some important project, and that was a significant project for me, and hence I could not shoot the videos for you. But friends, now I am back and I will upload videos on history of English literature, but still the project is not over and still I am working on the same project. But friends, I have an option for you that I can live stream the classes. I can come live and have the discussion on different periods of English literature. The thing is that you have to provide your opinion, whether you are in favor of live classes or you want the videos, static videos, as right now I am shooting in this video. If you want the live streaming, I am ready. Just you need to comment below and tell your opinion about this live streaming, and then we will have a strategy on live streaming. But I think we should come live and have discussion on these different periods of history of English literature. So friends, now let's go into the video and let's have discussion on Elizabethan Age. Now this age is also considered as Shakespearean Age, or this is called as Shakespearean Age because Shakespeare has a great contribution in this period. Friends, if we think about the timeline of this period, we find that in M.H. Abrams, he states that this period is considered from 1558 to 1602, and there are other scholars, other historians who think that this is not the right timeline and they have their own timelines of this period. For example, we have William J. Long. He says that the timeline of Elizabethan Age is 1550 to 1620, and for Edward Albert, he says that the timeline of Elizabethan period is 1560 to 1640. Though the timelines of this period varies, but we need to concentrate on the timeline given by M.H. Abrams, that is 1558 to 1602, because the Queen Elizabeth I came on throne in 1558 and she died in 1603. And this date is considered as this correct date of the Elizabethan period. But friends, though the dates are vary, we have for our convenience the date from 1558 to 1600, not 2 or not 3. Let's discuss about the historical background of this period, and then let's talk about the non-dramatic poets of the period. In this video, we are going to have discussion only on the historical background and the non-dramatic poets, and in non-dramatic poets we are going to talk about 5 significant poets in this first part of this Elizabethan Age. Friends, it is very difficult to include all the material, all the poets, all the authors and their works in single tutorial or in single video. So I am making the parts of Elizabethan period. This is the first part of Elizabethan period, and in this part we will have discussion on historical background and a few poets. So let's first discuss about the historical background of Elizabethan period. Now students, as we think about Elizabethan Age or the Shakespearean Age in the whole history of English literature, we find that this is one of the golden period of English literature, and in this period we find a lot of literature has flourished, and there are many poets, many authors and many writers who have written their works and they have become the significant personalities in the history of English literature. First, we will talk about political and social atmosphere of the age. We find that this is a calm period for the production of literature, and in this period, though there are not so many upheavals in the field of social reformations and in the field of political reformations, but we find that this period has brought a great kind of atmosphere to produce literature. For example, we find that there was a stable social contentment, there was a stable political reformations with the reign of Elizabeth I. When she came on throne in 1558, there was some disturbances in the political history of England, but she very soon has made these disturbances vanish from the history, and she started political reformations and again she started social reformations, and in this period we find that industrialization also extended to the villages of the England, and there we find many people are employed, and they were contented, there was satisfaction all over in the society. And the outcome of this satisfaction we find in literature. There flourished a great kind of literature in this period, and Queen Elizabeth was in favor of literature and arts, and hence she gave patronage to the fields of literature and arts, and hence we find that the great literature produced in this period. So here we find the remarks of John Milton quoted in William J. Long's History of English Literature. So let's have this quotation by Milton and understand the very atmosphere of the period of Elizabeth or the Shakespearean age. A noble and puissant nation, rousing herself like a strong man after sleep and shaking her invincible locks. So this description leads to the reformation in social life and in political life, as we found that he has described England as a great nation in this quotation or in his words. Now from here we find a gradual reformation in all the fields and in all the sectors, and hence literature could take a bound, literature could take a leap from lower to the higher level in the society. So this age was the time of intellectual liberty. A lot of writers and authors enjoyed intellectual liberty, and they wrote very freely on various subjects. So this is also the outcome of Elizabethan age. Again we find that there are so many explorers who sailed around the world. For example, we have Drake, he sailed around the world, and those experiences we find spread in the life of England, and there we find literature came from the various stratas of the society, in particular this age. Now friends, this age is compared with the golden age in the Athens. For example, we have the age of Pericles in Athens, then we have the age of Augustus in Rome, and again we have Louis XIV in the France. This age is compared with all these ages, because in these ages we find the literature is flourished, and we have the great kind of literature produced in particular ages. So this age is compared with the other ages in other countries or in other nations. Now friends, let's move to the second part of this tutorial. This is all about the historical and we can say that political background of the Elizabethan period. So this is the major background. Then we have non-dramatic poets, this second part, and in non-dramatic poets we have very first poet Edmund Spenser. Edmund Spenser is famous for his Fairy Queen, and when we look at his personal life we find that he was poor in his early life, but he studied in the Cambridge, and there he spent many days in the company of Italian poets. He gained knowledge, he studied their classics and have influence of Italian poets and the classics of the Greek and Italian masters. Now friends, Edmund Spenser composed a few poems, and all these poems are very famous. First he composed Fairy Queen, and we have Fairy Queen as a significant contribution in the history of English literature. Spenser's favorite poet was Geoffrey Chaucer, and he modeled some of his poems on Geoffrey Chaucer's, but he do not want to compare himself with Geoffrey Chaucer, though he composed many poems like Geoffrey Chaucer. Now friends, we have Fairy Queen, a very significant poem in the history of English literature, and when we look at the plan of Fairy Queen, we find that Edmund Spenser wanted to write 24 books of Fairy Queen, but he could complete only 6 books, and this is one of the most significant long poems in English literature. He has many things to explore in Fairy Queen. For example, he has invented a new form for the Fairy Queen, Spenserian stanzas, and in these 9 line stanzas we find that there are 8 lines of 5 feet, and the last 9th line is in 6 feet, which is called as Alexandrine. And the rhyming scheme of this Spenserian stanza goes like this: AB, AB, BC, BC, and the last line is C, 4, 4 plus 1 line. So 9 lines are called Spenserian stanza. This is a new invention in the history of English literature. Spenser has given, and later hundreds of English poets has followed his path, followed his Spenserian stanza for composition of poems or composition of their dramas. In Fairy Queen, we find that he modeled the human virtues with his characters. For example, we have their characters. For example, Lady Una represents the religion. We have Sir Gayan, who represents the temperance. We have other characters who represent different kinds of human virtues, and all these human virtues are taken in the form of characters, and hence Fairy Queen is famous. So friends, this is all about Fairy Queen. Now we have his next poem, which is also significant, Shepherd's Calendar. He is also known for his Shepherd's Calendars, and this Shepherd's Calendar is modeled on the 12 months of the year. Each month has given a particular place in this Shepherd's Calendar. It is a pastoral romance. It is a pastoral kind of poem. In that period, we find that many pastoral elements were used. For example, rustic life, rustic behavior, rustic kind of things are there in the poems of the poets who have composed in this particular period. So Shepherd's Calendar also is one of the pastoral poems. Next we have Epithalamion. It is a marriage hymn. He also composed a sonnet collection called Amoretti, which includes 89 sonnets. Then we have his significant poem called Astrophel, which is an elegy based on the death of Sir Philip Sidney, and we find that the poet grieves or mourns for the death of beloved, and here we find Edmund Spenser's beloved is Sir Philip Sidney, and hence he composed this elegy called Astrophel. So these are some of the poems which are famous in English literature, and still we find that there is an audience for these poems, for these works in English literature. Now friends, let's move to the next poet of this period, Thomas Sackville. He is generally classed with Thomas Watt and Surrey, Earl of Surrey. But friends, his contribution to English literature, he has composed a very fine poem called The Mirror of Magistrates. And in this Mirror of Magistrates, he wanted to reveal the dysfunctioning in the government, the dysfunctioning in the system, and up to some extent he became successful there in representing all these things, and hence he titled his poem as The Mirror of Magistrates. The next contribution of Thomas Sackville is his composition of Pericles or Porrex or Gorboduc. He composed in collaboration with Thomas Norton. This is considered the first tragedy in English literature, which is famously known as Gorboduc. But the initial or the original title of this tragedy is Pericles and Porrex. So this is his major contribution in this period. Now we have next poet Sir Philip Sidney. Sir Philip Sidney is actually a critic. Many scholars consider him as the first English critic, but he also is a poet, and some of his poems are famous. Let's understand his some famous poems. His famous poem we have Arcadia, and Arcadia is nothing but a pastoral romance. There we find the delights of rural life, the rural behavior, the rural manners, and the natural environment in Arcadia. His next composition we have Astrophel and Stella. It is a collection of sonnets and songs. There are 108 sonnets and 11 songs. These all sonnets and songs are famous in English literature. The next contribution of Sir Philip Sidney is very important, an essay. He composed a fine essay in the history of English criticism, that is The Apology for Poetry, or famously known as Defense of Poetry. Actually, this is an answer to Stephen Gosson's pamphlet called The School of Abuse, where Stephen Gosson attacked the poetry, and in defense of this attack, Sir Philip Sidney composed this Apology for Poetry. And friends, this Apology for Poetry is still a significant contribution, a significant piece of criticism in the history of English literature, and still we find this composition or this work is kept for syllabus, kept for study in various universities, in various colleges. Now students, the next poet in this period we have George Chapman. George Chapman is famous for his metrical translations of Iliad, Odyssey and Homer. So his Homer is very famous, the translation of these great epics. He also completed the incomplete poem of Christopher Marlowe, that is Hero and Leander, and the credit should be given to George Chapman for completing the Marlowe's incomplete poem Hero and Leander. So this is the contribution of George Chapman. The next important poet in this series we have Michael Drayton, and he is famous for his Polyolbion. It is a poem in many thousands couplets, and this is also a significant contribution in the history of English literature. And he also composed some other poems. For example, we have Baron's Wars, Heroic Epistle of England, and the Ballad of Agincourt. Now friends, this is all about the first part in Elizabethan Age or the Shakespearean Age. In the next part, we will discuss about the next authors and the rise of drama. Now I am sure you understand this first part and the developments in the Elizabethan period. Now friends, if you have any problem or any query, you can comment below in the comment section. And again, I ask you about the live streaming. If you want live streaming, please comment below in the comment box. We will have live streaming on these different types of periods in history of English literature. So thank you very much for watching this complete tutorial. Please like this video, like this Literature Simply channel, and subscribe to Literature Simply if you are not subscribed till, and share these videos among your friends.